stranded in space on a ship crashing into the atmosphere of an unknown planet, Emile Spencer knew that the only way to survive would be by his own wits and guile. He vowed that somehow he would find and slay the titanic cosmic beast that put him in this predicament, VY572. With every installment, we follow Emile's explorations and discoveries on this journey of revenge against all odds. I'm Midnight Jester, and this is the Left Behind Starforge series.
It's another episode of this podcast, and you definitely remember where we left off. I put you on quite a bit of a cliffhanger. I put all of us on a bit of a cliffhanger. I've been wanting to know for an entire week. Does Emile successfully actually purge all of the code and thwart Lastech? I don't know. You don't know. Let's find out together with no more stalling. So we can start by diving straight into the procedure. Since they have filled up the entirety of their threat track, or whatever it's called, they've gotten 6 out of 6 circles, I am forced to make a progress move with 8 boxes filled in on Emile's changing of the jump code. So let's make that progress roll. Turns into a weak hit. I rolled an 8 and a 5, which means I succeed, but not without cost. I must pay the price. Make this a minor cost relative to the scope of the scene. So let's see, what kind of a price should there be on this? Emile is successfully going to be able to purge all of the code. However, I feel like the price should be related to Lastech's response to that. Okay, I have an idea which is indeed relatively minor as far as this particular scene challenge goes, but I think is still definitely impactful and important. So Lastech is too late. They're not able to stop Emile. There's a group of Lastech employees that got caught in the stasis field upstairs. They were able to break out, but by the time they get down into the control room here, Emile has already put enough protections in that Emile's able to just step aside. He doesn't have to actively stop them from using the computer. They're banging away on keys and getting locked out and just not able to access it or stop the process. And the computer is connected to way too many things for them to be willing to just shut it down. That would be problematic. It would affect the entire course of the Hyperion. It just wouldn't fly, and there'd probably be revolt. So they're not able to do that. They work at this for days and days, just watching as content is getting deleted, and ultimately they're not able to stop it in time. Nor are they able to catalog it, improve it. Emile is successful. However, they know it was Emile's doing. Everything has been reported back to Deuce, who is of course furious. We see a moment of Deuce up in their office. Deuce is listening to a transmission, and it's one that we're familiar with. We're able to recognize it as the one that Valkyrie sent out, trying to tell all of the Vault Hunters about Emile and about the bounty on his head, functionally. It took time to get to this point, which is why Deuce is only listening to it now, but we see that Deuce has kind of finally finished decoding this signal, playing back the unencrypted version, and Deuce hears about this. And the price that is paid is that Deuce is going to send a signal back with an update about Emile's current location on Hyperion. And so what I'm going to do to represent that is my pay the price is I am going to fill in another box on the threat tracker. Because as you might recall, I now have Emile's I will make amends to the people of Concord with the gift of a power core. He's got 1 pip of progress on that, and he is constantly going up against what is functionally a 10-segment progress track. Usually it gets filled in more when he stalls for time or does things of that nature, like really ignoring making progress on this. It represents the threat making progress in the background. But in this case, it's actually that his actions here are affecting this. I've given myself a 2nd pip on the threat track for that vow. And so nothing is going to happen to him immediately, but it's updated information, and it makes it closer and closer to Valkyrie achieving her goal, which is basically kill Emile Spencer. I forget exactly how I wrote it. Yes. The exact threat goal I wrote was have Emile killed in service of revenge. And so certainly getting an updated location on him will help further that agenda. And of course, it still has to reach her and everything, and it's just one step along the way. But importantly, Emile did change the jump code, and that is definitely worthy of another piece of progress on I will bring an end to the negotiations of Hyperion. So I'm going to mark progress on that track, giving me 8 out of 10. I could totally try and do this vow now, saying that Emile has done what he needed to indeed make sure that there can be no lawsuit. And I think we even see a little bit of that around the ship where we start seeing Lastech employees packing their shit up and leaving. Like, there are a number of different ships that they came on. A few of them are already leaving the hangar. They're boxing things up. Lastech's presence is getting pulled away. However, Deuce is still here. And I think the final thing that I want to go on, which will get me fully to 10 out of 10 boxes on that vow, is Emile has to have a conversation with Deuce. And I think that Emile should have to fully convince him that Emile did his side of it. Because obviously he skirted around what he implied he was going to do. So let's set that scene. Emile voluntarily goes up to Deuce's office. Let's say he brings Fern with him as a bit of backup, just in case. Actually, hold on. Since there has indeed been a lot of time where Emile has been able to kind of work and let things happen automated in the background, before I do that meeting, I think Emile actually legitimately has time to make his first use of the reskinned firebrand talent I gave myself. Because when I rest and meditate to gather this energy, which again, this is representative of Emile's control over the electromagnetic pulses that he's learned to be able to channel them by his own desire and indeed take on that energy. So at some point during this whole process, and in the in-between when the code is getting deleted and he is maybe even getting Hyperion set up with the new jump code, the more open source version that Lastech has no claim to. At some point during that time, which spans over days, Emile is going to rest and meditate to gather this energy, and so I will roll plus spirit. Let's do it. Currently my spirit is at 4 out of 5, so looking pretty good on that. I've got no ads on this. Alright, I get a weak hit. Rolled an 8 and a 10 on the challenge dice. I'm just happy that's a weak hit. So on a weak hit, I'd take +2 to my new fire track, or EMP track or something. Again, this is all reskinned, but I bring this up to a 2. On a strong hit, I would have put it all the way up to a 3. So the way this works is, now that I have something in this fire, when I make moves aided by this energy to attack or overcome obstacles, I get to add a +2 to my roll, and then I use up 1 of my fire. So every time I do that, costs me 1. So I can do that twice. And I can theoretically bring that up to a maximum of 5. Now, realistically, I think I had enough narrative time to have brought that higher and higher, but I don't want to just keep rolling until that point. He's going to have a chance to do it once. It's his first time really actively meditating and gathering this energy. And I think it's indeed prompted because he recognizes he's about to have a meeting with a robot who's not especially happy with him. And he knows that having the ability to channel some amount of EMP... Actually, I don't think it's even that. I think he's just trying to focus himself to be prepared, and feeling that energy welling up and having that greater control over it is more of a byproduct. He recognizes it after the fact, that he's sitting there getting a chance, collecting his thoughts, feeling a bit at peace, and by the end of it, he feels that the kind of crackle going through his body and knows, oh, the time has to be now. I feel juiced up to be able to have this as an ace up my sleeve, because there's no way Deuce is anticipating something like that. So then we head up to Deuce's office. And indeed, there are various things already being loaded into these metal crates. It's not fully packed up, but there are fewer things out and about than before. The desk is much more cleared. Deuce is perhaps even in the middle of packing things up, and Emile walks in. I don't think Emile even knocks. I think Emile just opens up the door, and Deuce is in the middle of things, looks up, and then says,
"Oh, it's you, Emile Spencer. Are you incapable of avoiding the outcome of being an utter thorn in my side?"
"Actually, I'm just here to collect payment, and then I can be out of your way."
"You really expect payment after the mockery that you have done?"
I expect that you're going to make good on your terms as I have done mine. After all, there are no good outcomes to breaking your word. You remember. Either your soul is doomed or you learn that you don't have one to begin with. So why roll those dice?
How? How is it that you feel you have abided by the terms of the agreement? You have utterly nullified them. My soul is in no such danger.
No. You're going to lecture me on how an iron vow works? You don't know. They're not your culture. An iron vow is not about the spirit of the arrangement. An iron vow is about exactly what you swear on the iron. It holds you to your word. And my word was that I would put an end to these negotiations. And look at you all packing your shit out of here. Negotiations seem pretty ended to me. That's the way it works. It's a real be careful what you wish for. And frankly, I can't believe that Lastech is employing somebody as incompetent as to fall for something so completely basic. But you did. And so you owe me. And I think obviously we're going to do this as a compel move. Emile is adversarially telling him, look, man, this is the way things are. And he is trying to persuade Deuce that their soul is truly on the line and it is in their best interest to not try and weasel out of this. I think it is fair to say that this is definitely more in the threaten or incite range here. More of an insight than anything like that. But it's definitely not pacifying or bartering or anything like that. You could make a weak argument, I think, for it being about swindling. But I don't think so. The real swindle happened earlier. This really is just an insight more than anything. So this is going to be an iron roll. I don't have any ads on it, and I don't think Emile would so immediately be using his EMP capabilities to give myself an ad on this. So let's just see how this goes. Going to roll it straight. Compel with iron. I've got some momentum. And indeed, the momentum would be enough to turn this from a miss to a weak hit, so I've got a decision to make here. Go for a miss where they refuse or make a demand that costs me greatly, or burn some momentum, turn it into a weak hit where they will have a demand of their own. And I think that's what I'm most interested in. Let's start kind of anew. Burn the momentum, turn this into a weak hit. So I need to envision their counteroffer and then take +1 momentum. So what is the demand or complication to this? The original arrangement was for 2 things. The easier one of the 2 was that Emile would be given Shark's prisoner number, allowing him to better research and work on his ability to clear Shark's name. I don't think anything is going to mess with that. Though maybe. There could be a complication when Deuce, like maybe Deuce is just pulling that up right now, and in so doing triggers an alarm or something, makes a red flag. It could be that. I kind of like that. Because I can see Deuce as wanting to give Emile a bit of a taste of his own medicine, where the agreement was to give him the prisoner number, but Emile never said anything about what else Deuce might do while in that file. So that's one possibility. The other half of the agreement was, of course, the very expensive part of it, which was all about the delivery of this massive power core, the likes of which would exceed what the people of Concord would have even gotten had Emile not stolen their ship. It would give them even more power than that. I think I'm going to go with that first thought, and the reason is I think Deuce is convinced that their soul could well be on the line, and that the power core is the more major part of this. They don't want to fuck with that. But Deuce also recognizes that the shark thing, that's personal to Emile. It's not about business. And so if they screw Emile over in that regard, it could hurt more. So first things first, I think Deuce sends Emile... We talked about the kind of galaxy-wide internet that exists, and the email that Emile even gave to Grudge. Deuce send some information to that same email, Emile's contact information. Deuce sends the location of a shipyard. A shipyard that is in a partnership with Lastech. It's on a completely different planet. I think it's not even in this sector. Nor is it likely directly along the way now that Emile has the path to get Fern back to their homeworld, I don't think it's in that direction. But Emile is given a location of a planet that has a shipyard on it where basically if Emile shows this information to them, there will be the power core he's looking for, paid in full, ready for him to pick up. So Deuce is like,
Very well, Emile Spencer. First things first, check your communications. You will find I have already sent you the proper information to lead you to your payment.
and the other thing,
I'm getting to that. I simply must connect and pull it up.
Deuce connects into Imperium database stuff using the local hub that Hyperion has on access to the internet. It is definitely very slow because indeed we are not in the terminus, but it has enough updated information that Deuce is able to pull up Shark's prisoner record through some manner of legal database. They give Emile the prisoner number. Everything's all good on that. However, once Emile has left the room... Okay, I just thought of a thing that I really kind of like. Deuce has this file open, of course, and basically modifies it on their own and submits it as an update to however this massive galaxy internet works, submits it in as a change to this page in some kind of official capacity. The change that they make is changing out Shark's old mugshot for a picture of Emile Spencer. And what's so perfect about this is Emile is flying around in the Stardust, which is indeed the ship that got stolen from the Imperium where Shark was last seen. There's even mention of that in the file. The file notes how Shark escaped incarceration along with a number of other associates, stole this Imperium ship, and now Shark, who is otherwise lost in a sea of lots and lots of people who got there, you know, he didn't really have personal attention on him. It probably won't get a lot of scrutiny. Not a lot of people will explicitly remember what he looked like. And now the file has Emile's picture, which should certainly add some complication when Emile starts trying to look into clearing Shark's name and showing up to official Imperium places in order to do that. However, the agreement is made. The stuff has been done. I'm going to give myself the last 2 pips of progress on bringing an end to the negotiations of Hyperion. Now, admittedly, the way I've been narrating this sounds like I already had a strong hit on the result of this. And at this point, there are only 2 possibilities. Well, 3 technically. I could either get a strong hit. I could technically get a strong hit with a match, which is the sub possibility of that. Or the other possibility is a double 10 miss with a match, where I could just massively fail with a huge, completely out of the blue complication. And I think that would be very fitting for this moment, where Emile is heading back to their ship, which, let's just say for convenience sake, since I don't want to spend any more time on Hyperion, I kind of want to move on to other parts of the plot. Let's say it's been enough time that Emile's ship is fixed. Fern is ready to go. Emile thinks everything's good, but it could turn out that actually, when you truly swear on iron, as Emile has, the cosmos does care about the intent of what you said and not just the letter of it, and Emile has not held up his end of the bargain. Still very likely to be a strong hit. It's a 99% chance. And indeed, that's what happens. Sometimes the 1% chance does not dramatically rear its head. So the vow is fulfilled. I get to mark a reward on my Quest's Legacies track. This one was, despite how many episodes we gave it, only a dangerous vow. I gave it a lot more time than I was originally intending to, but that's okay. I enjoyed the process. So let's give 2 ticks to our Quest's Legacies track. This does not fill in a complete box. Discoveries is really close to doing that. Quests, however, just has half a box filled. And then let's clear that vow as completed. There we go. I am tempted to give another pip on I will clear Shark's name, because indeed Emile worked on both. However, the book is definitely clear that, even though I have done it in the past, you should not be having one thing give you progress on 2 different tracks. And I would rather that the pip of progress of completing this vow go to making amends to the people of Concord with the gift of a power core. That's the more major thing that he got. Clearing Shark's name, getting the prisoner number alone isn't really helping clear it's not really a milestone on clearing Shark's name. It more allows other things to happen. Yeah, that's going to need more devoted focus in order to do that. So I am going to give myself the pip on making amends to the people of Concord with the gift of a power core, because we have that set up. We certainly have not actually picked up the core yet. That'll be another major thing that needs to get done. But we're off on our way. Now let's have Emile and Fern just back in the hangar. Maybe one last quick conversation with Minna as she hands over the completely repaired ship back over to Emile. Let's set the integrity back up to 5, as that's been paid for in the fiction. She's going over all the various parts, demonstrating how they're able to fuse this panel back in and make it seamless. Emile indeed verifies the work is exceptionally well done. He cannot tell where the new panel is at all outside of just knowing where it's supposed to be. Min is clearly very proud of the work, saying, yeah, it was definitely a bit of a challenge, but I told the boys, do you know who this ship is for? This is for Emile Spencer. This is the guy who got Lastech out of here. We gotta pull out all the stops. And Emile blushes a little bit, saying, I was definitely not expecting to be any kind of celebrity around here, but I very much appreciate it. This is incredible work you've done. It's incredible work you've done. I had my doubts at the beginning and gave you a bit of a hard time. I wanted to say officially, no hard feelings, and I personally apologize for getting off on the wrong foot. You got me on a bad day, but you're a good man there, Emile. You're a good man. And I appreciate the help you've given me. I can't say I know what specifically will bring me back here, but all the same, I hope it's not the last time we run into each other, Absolutely. Well, if you ever do, I hope you don't have nearly as much damage as what you brought in last time. I hope you've learned your lesson. But it'll still be good to see your face. She holds out a big meaty hand for a handshake and says, it was truly a pleasure. Good flying out there. And Emile, of course, shakes her hand and says, fully appreciate it. You take care of yourself. Actually, before we take off, this is going to happen in the past. I'm going to take a bit of a page out of Blades in the Dark here and give myself a flashback, because there was totally time for this to happen while Lastech was getting their butts out of here and Emile had access to the jump computer and just major information about where this ship goes. Emile would have had time to do a little something here. I think he would totally be doing some poring through the logs of where this ship has been, footage along the way, looking through all the records, any signs he can find of not just a smear, but the full VY572. Hyperion goes all over the place, jumps around, it's mobile, it's seen some shit, and it's got various cameras on it. It's all stored in these logs. Emile wants to find any more record of something up to date. Where is VY572 now? What's it up to? So let's do that, gather information. Going to be with wits, and while this does involve a computer, I do not think that this would benefit from my tech asset. We're just going to do this straight. So wits roll, and we get... Ooh, that was close. That was almost a miss with a match. Instead, it's a weak hit. So I get new insight, but it also complicates my quest. Envision what I discover, then I take +1 momentum. I think it's pretty simple in this case, and it's partly why I'm not going to give myself another pip of progress on that. You get some up-to-date information on VY572 and their location. The complication is just, it's stupid far away. Many sectors away. Hyperion was in a very different part of the galaxy. Let's even say, I forget what the... So there's the terminus, there's the outlands, and then there's a step beyond that. And I can't recall what that's called. If that's the expanse? There's an area where it's really just deep, deep space. There's really not a lot out there. It's barely colonized at all. Vast, vast distances between things. And I think the update is that VY572 is seen at a registered at a large distance away out there. And so going after it to pursue it would involve a fair amount of danger and like a need to be really prepared for that sort of thing. Because there's just, when things go wrong, there's very little to turn to for help. And I think also part of the way we're going to make this a little bit more complicated, there are definitely rumors, largely unverified, but you hear them from a lot of places that's the here be dragons zone, basically. And so it makes sense that VY572 would be retreating to that area. That's the land where it's known for its monsters, its space monsters. I don't think they're all as utterly titanically sized as VY572. I think that is utterly an outlier. But all the same, you go into that void, which I'm just going to call the Expanse because, again, I can't remember what it's officially called, and it might even be that. But when you go out into the Expanse, you better come prepared. There are just space monsters and horrors and things that'll mess with your mind. And because there is so little out there, the reports are that they will very actively go to attack starships that are out there as some manner of food. What exactly they are, it changes so much from the various different stories. Emile doesn't know explicitly what to expect, just that monstrous horrors are out there that will seek out and attack your ship if they find it. Those that go into the Expanse do so at their own peril, and generally speaking, try to make it quick and stealthy. That's what Emile learns. Back to the present. Because again, that happened days ago when Emile just had very little to do but access to a computer with a lot of information on it. Emile boards the Stardust. Fern is there, eager and ready. Emile's been hyping this up as all right, we're finally doing, we're gonna get out of here. Sits in the pilot's chair and blasts on out of here. Let's indeed just set this course, because as you recall, Emile was able to get a charted route that would take him from here through a kind of wormhole that would take him nearby. It's a bit of a shortcut that will get him right to the area, the neighborhood where Fern's planet is. I think what I'm going to say is this route does not go directly to the planet. That would be too convenient that Grudge was directly right there. I don't think that's the case. However, I do think it's in the right sector. And this is a sector that's maybe even a couple of sectors away. There's a great deal of distance to cover. We're going to set a course to that sector, and then what I'm going to do is we're going to roll this into basically like it's a session 0 of the game, where we're going to generate a sector, find out what all is in here. One of the planets will be Fern's, and we'll find out which one it is. But first things first, setting a course, which is a move where I roll my plus supply, currently at 3. And we get a strong hit. Fantastic. You reach your destination and the situation there favors you. Take +1 momentum, setting me all the way at momentum of 5. And yeah, I'll keep the fact that the situation there favors me in mind as we make this sector. What that means to me is we're going to generate the whole thing, and I will choose not Fern's planet, but otherwise a nice place to be. Another place to stop off along the way. If there's some other kind of space station or something designed for recovery, maybe something like that. But let's not bandy about, let's generate a sector. So let's go through this procedure. Step 1 is, what is my region? Terminus, Outlands, Expanse. Oh yes, I did remember correctly, the Expanse. Or Void, which is beyond the Expanse. In the reaches beyond the Forge, isolated stars are separated by vast gulfs of nothing. Traveling and settling here is impractical, if not impossible. I'm just going to declare that Fern's planet is still within the Outlands. It's a region of recent expansion. Settlements here are scattered, and navigational paths are often uncharted and perilous. So we're in the Outlands, which means there are going to be 3 settlements within this sector. So let's figure out what they all are. So first off, let's do settlement number 1. We're going to give it a name. This settlement is called Krux. Location, planet side. Okay, so this one is, we're going to have to figure out what is actually on this planet as well. We'll figure out the planet details afterwards, but we have Krux, a planet side one. Its population is few, which is less than dozens. So we're talking probably a handful of people. This is one small ship's worth of people that have settled here on this planet, which is intriguing to me. We've only had things that are in the hundreds. We're finally getting just this tiny, just one crew, an away team of people is on a place, basically. Authority, we have none/lawless. It does not sound like things are going too well for this people that seem to be maybe crash landed on this planet, doing what they can to survive on this planet. This is not a group that's got it all together. Maybe even they used to have more, but because of how lawless this is, their numbers are dwindling because they're just not surviving. Settlement projects, we roll twice and get salvage and migration. Yeah, more and more this is lining up with the idea that these are people that would really like to get off this planet. They're not having a great time here. They definitely don't seem like they intend to live here. They're kind of a lot like Emile earlier in this game. I imagine they don't have a functional ship to get off, and they are going around to find whatever resources they can just to survive long enough to either find and salvage or manufacture what they need to get their ship operational and get back off this planet. That's where my mind is leading, though I don't want to know too much about it because indeed we haven't necessarily visited this planet. In fact, I'm a little bit more interested in the planet itself. So let's indeed generate that planet, which is step 4. This is a rocky world. Its randomly generated name is Quietus. I think I better rather than going with that, I think I like the idea that this planet doesn't have an official, nice, word name like that because nobody is intended to stop off here. Honestly, so far, this is actually sounding pretty good for Fern's actual home planet. It sounds like it's largely uninhabited. People don't have a lot of cause to be here. There is some manner of crew that is there right now. But yeah, I'm leaning towards Krux being Fern's home planet. So let's find out a little bit more about it. Since Emile has been on a ship that has been there before and has some amount of information about Fern, some of this might come from logs he actually has. And so because of that, I am going to find out. Observe from space, we would see that it is perpetual night there. So this is a place that is so far away from any kind of sun that there's no functional difference between day and night, which seems utterly hellish to be stranded there. If there is indeed this population center in this perpetual night, that does not sound great. It also might actually be, in order to make it a little bit more survivable than that, why don't we say that the perpetual night is less a matter of being far from the sun and more that the skies are occluded in a perpetual night of just thick, stormy clouds that cover the entirety of the planet. There is a solid core inside of what seems like a gas giant at first, but layers and layers that just block out enough sunlight that it's perpetual night. I think there might still be enough radiation to keep this place warm? Yeah, I like that idea, where the perpetual night is not because it's so far away from a sun, but just because the skies are all blocked out. Whether naturally or not, we don't currently know, but they are. There is no or thin atmosphere here on this rocky world, which I'm starting to imagine very much looking like the real world in the Matrix. When we see the surface, it's all black, craggy rocks and a blocked out sky that looks all stormy and just uninviting, and why would you want to live here? You don't go to this place unless you have to. And because we can, let's find out. This star whose light is being blocked out entirely on this unnamed rocky planet, what kind of a star is this? What do we got here? What is our stellar object? A burning yellow star. Very much like Earth's sun. Very relatable. There might be other planets here that are a little bit more nicely habitable. I'm not going to roll on the planet for things like how much life there is there. Or rather, I'm going to roll on the planet for how much life there is there, but because we know that Fern is around, there are certain options that I'm just going to mulligan. We know there's got to be at least some amount of life there. And I'd like if Fern's species weren't the only one, but let's see. Life says... Yeah, like this generated extinct, which is a possibility that I'm not accepting. Life is not extinct there. Life is scarce. Fine. Scarce life, but existent. At the very least, there are pheroids there on this planet, which, man, I'm starting to imagine them having kind of come up from the ground as almost like rock elementals at first that evolved over time and became something different, where they're just this sentient metalloid that came from the rich ore of this planet. The exact environmental conditions were there to eventually give a kind of sentience to the rock of this place, and some other life as well. But we don't know as much about that. Let's figure out what our second settlement is, because that's one of 3. And we get... This one is also planet-side. Cool. Let's make another planet. This one is a grave world planet, which, ooh, love the sound of that. I don't even know explicitly what that necessarily means, but it's just so evocative. Going to have this generate various details here. Let's get the name Anubis. Sweet, not changing that at all. We have a planet here called Anubis. There is a settlement on it. It has a toxic atmosphere, and when you see it from space, you see an orbiting ship graveyard. So Anubis has Saturn-like rings, I think, filled with just so many collected ships. It's enough that from a distance, it looks just as complete as the rings around Saturn. Just so much debris and detritus out there around Anubis. As far as the settlement there, the population is in the thousands. So this is the largest place we've seen yet, actually, as far as population goes. There are thousands of people here living on Anubis. The authority there is unyielding. Man, this also does not seem like this does not seem like a wonderful place. I don't want to make it just where this is, the evil planet. A lot of these words make me spark those kinds of images of like the Sith world or thoughts like that. I don't necessarily want to go there. Even though unyielding is a very loaded term, I think there are more benevolent ways to take that. More just that there is a strong culture here that brooks no shit. The law is the law is the law here, which is interesting because it is not in the Terminus. So that law is probably not the law of the Imperium, but the authority here will not kowtow to outsiders or insiders who want to push up against the boundaries of what that law says. As for a better sense of what that might be, let's roll the settlement projects twice. We get shipbuilding. Kind of makes sense if there's an orbiting ship graveyard. Sounds like they scrap a lot of their failed projects. And secrecy. Man, if I hadn't already determined that the shipyard where Emile has to go to pick up the power core should be in a completely different sector, potentially multiple sectors away, I'd be like, this should be the place where he has to go. But no, this is a different shipyard. He has no such arrangement with them. There are a lot of failed ships here, or at least retired ships. Maybe failure is too loaded of a term, but there are ships that are not in use that make a kind of graveyard, a ringed graveyard around the planet. They also definitely build ships here and are very secretive about it. I like the idea that this has nothing to do with Lastech. This is perhaps intentionally a planet that Lastech does not deal with. I actually think the settlement on Anubis might even... It's not that they're against Lastech. They'd be perfectly willing to work with Lastech, but I want to make it so that this place, there's something a little off about them, and Lastech isn't into it. They may not be fully evil and the Sith world and all of that, but the secrecy definitely makes me think this is a bit of a more mystical, weird place. Their culture is a little too far from Lastech's corporate world. They're a little too straight-laced for it. The settlement here is called Bulwark. I think in this case, I am not going to predetermine whether or not there's any life on this planet. We're just going to keep this vague. These are the little bits of notes that Emile is gleaning from the old information and scans and logs that we have from Grudge. Grudge made some notes while in the area, but didn't spend enough time to really get into the nitty-gritty in these logs that Emile now has. But let's give ourselves our third and final settlement. This one is going to be orbital. Do I want it to be around a third planet, or do I want this to also be orbital around either Anubis or Krux? Certainly could have it orbit one of those. I kind of do like the idea of there being a separate orbital settlement within all the ship debris around Anubis. It could be related to the people of Bulwark. It might be completely different people, but let's find out. Let's make an orbital settlement around Anubis. Its population is apparently few, so same, just handful, perhaps just another starship that's out there. Because again, we are sub-dozens on that. So it's orbital, it's few. Its name is Tyson, which sounds like it would be the name of a starship to me. Just like Krux is, I think, the name of the ship that those people came from. Tyson is some ship that is active, still in orbit around Anubis. So let's see, what do we got here? As a first look, it's got rustic architecture and significant structural damage, which very well might help it blend in with this ship graveyard. They may be actively trying to hide out here. That's what that says to me. They see an opportunity and are like, you know, we could lay low for a little while here. At first, I was going to say that I don't think we would have reason to know anything about their authority, because why would we have any details about this, but why don't we give ourselves a reason? This information that we have about this sector, it came from Grudge, right? And Grudge, of course, had an old crew that we determined she abandoned when a job went wrong. Why don't we have this ship be her old crew? Let's tie it all together. So what is Grudge? Let's have the most details about this one, because Grudge knows everything about the Tyson. Grudge got away on some other vessel. And it explains why they're hiding out, too. The job went wrong. They're laying low here. So their authority, also unyielding. Okay? Which makes sense to me, particularly because they're not a full-on society with a lot of individuals with a complex architecture of how things work. They probably have a command structure. This is a crew. They work to do jobs. It's a rigid structure that they're working in. And they're not large enough to be doing trade with other planets or anything like that. They don't need to have a lot in the way of diplomacy. They're just after their own interests. So an unyielding authority with a few people there. Let's roll a couple of projects for them and we get salvage and research. Well, they're in a great place to salvage. They're in the middle of a ship graveyard, so if they're salvaging for the purpose of repairing their own ship, which seems to be a bit of a theme in this sector, this would be the place. There's a lot nearby to be looking into. I actually do like the idea, though, that they're salvaged in order to shake things up. It's not about repairing their ship. Even though they have significant structural damage, I want to say that they're willing to go with it. They're fine. This ship's seen worse. It's gotten through all kinds of scraps. It looks like a bucket of bolts, but it'll be fine. I think that's kind of the perspective about the Tyson. The salvage that they're doing is more in service of the research that they're doing, which I do want to figure out what that is, but we're going to roll on some oracles to help inspire that. First, I'm going to roll their settlement trouble, which I think also might help inspire that. Dangerous discovery is their trouble. Well, that definitely all sounds related. So they have found something out here, and it's dangerous. Not necessarily to them, but what they found has very dangerous possibilities. Which makes me want to tie it back into what we talked about last session, where Emile talked about Lastech's forays into teleportation and the lack of safety involved with that. What if they have a related discovery? Some of the ships out here in the graveyard may have been some of the prototype efforts in that direction. Did they come from Lastech? Did the people on Anubis, I forget that place's name already, Bulwark. Did the people of Bulwark make a similar discovery in their own shipbuilding? Maybe. We absolutely do. We have talked about how they're weird and a little bit mystical. Maybe they come at it from another angle. There are like ungodly ways that make it happen. Yeah. Let's Let's use some classic kind of horror tropes on this. We're going to say that the people of Bulwark indeed get up to some... They have a firmer attachment to the worship of old gods than exists in many other places, certainly where Emile has come from. They get up to some more... Again, they're not evil, but they do some kind of culty shit there. Some real ritualistic, ancient, weird-looking leather-bound texts and lots of candles and dripping wax, and it's all that old imagery, right? The real culty hooded robe kind of stuff that they do there. But the big thing is they're not actually evil. And so I think that Bulwark did some experimentation with reaching out to their gods and calling out and all of that, and had some amount of spiritual responses. Subtle at first, the kind of reading into the flickering of the flame, prognostication kind of stuff, but maybe even things that were a little bit more overt. And I think when exploring in this area, at one point they made a kind of totem. I envision it as like this dark wood about the size of a heart, covered in these kind of carved vines and smeared over with various paints and pigments and carved sigils. Everything about it looks just arcane and strange. And why don't we go a step further and say this wooden heart totally beat. When the ritual was complete, it was a beating wooden heart that was representational of some god that they had been communicating with. They were basically summoning that god into existence one piece at a time. And when they were messing around with this sort of thing, they experimented with the idea of, could you put this kind of totem and hook it up to a starship, and like what would be the effects of that? If this were fueling its jump systems, what might that mean? And I think what they determined was very similar to teleportation from a different angle. The ship that had this heart attached to it totally could be commanded and made to make this opening in space, basically generate a wormhole on the fly that would go to a completely different section of space. But the results seemed very unstable, very off, and perhaps even hellish demonic creatures came out the other side, and it was just, nope, this is bad. It was shut down, disconnected. That ship was abandoned to the graveyard. And because none of their people live out there, and they don't really get a lot in the way of visitors, that seemed to be enough. Perhaps they found themselves incapable of destroying the heart. They tried, they tossed it into a fire given that it was made of wood, and it just survived, and eventually all they were left with was just abandon it in orbit. This thing is wrong. And they cut off ties from that god. They stopped worshipping it, they moved on to other things. Or maybe they considered it a failed summoning and just it called out to the wrong creature. Who knows what the people of Bulwark do? The notes aren't clear enough on that. We don't know about that. In fact, I don't think Emile knows about any of this because this goes beyond what Grudge's notes would cover. But I'm just too interested in it to not get into the details here. So the Tyson, in their salvage operations, have totally found this totem in part of their salvage. I think not, again, it's not in order to repair their ship. I think it's just, what all can we find out here? What's valuable? What can we make a buck from? Is there any functional weaponry? Is there anything we can use? They're just salvaging in general, and they totally found the wooden heart. It's not beating right now. I think it's gone into a kind of state of dormancy, but they're totally researching it and figuring out what was the deal with this. I think there is enough evidence nearby to suggest this was once hooked up to the ship where they found it, where they're like, why would that be? What could this do? And so I think the people of Tyson are working on this kind of unholy wormhole creation device. And man, I want to explore that so badly. That just sounds so cool to me. Let's finish out making this sector map. So we basically have 2 planets. Both have settlements of a kind on them. One of them has an orbital settlement as well. Now we just have to set some passages. In the Outlands, we make 2 passages. It could be a passage from one planet to another. It could be from one of those planets to the outside. We're certainly not going to actually connect everything, but clearly one of these passages should be to where we are now because we did follow that route to get here. And because I don't want to just start outside of Fern's planet, we're going to say that we're in orbit of Anubis right now. Besides, there's plenty of cool stuff there. So I'm going to make one of these passages a route from Anubis out of the sector to just some adjacent one. And then we get one more. Do I want there to be a route directly to the unnamed planet as well? Yeah, why not? I'm going to connect Anubis to the unnamed planet. It's just from the where we were coming from, we're stopping off at Anubis first. Actually, no. Again, I want it to be more of a journey to get to the unnamed planet where Fern lives. I'm just going to make a second passage from Anubis to a different sector. This is not where Emile came from, but there was enough related stuff in the logs where Emile does know how to get to a different sector from here. So we've got our passages on that. Step 8 would be zoom in on a settlement, which we basically did. We zoomed in on the Tyson. We gave it a trouble and all of that. So I basically just skipped ahead because I was too impatient. A local connection. I'm not going to do that. This time I don't want to know anybody in the area. We did it when we got to Hyperion and that was fun. I don't want to take the time to do it right now, and I think I would rather Emile is not familiar with the people in this area at all. So let's not make a connection. However, let's indeed still do step 10, the sector trouble. What is the trouble in this sector? We get betrayal from within. I'm going to declare, based on what we've determined so far, that this is the influence of the beating wooden heart. It's dormant still, but it's radiating out over the whole sector its influence, this corrupting influence that turns people against each other. Perhaps the people that crash landed on the planet were doing better at a time, but the reason why their authority is so lacking, why they're not able to get anything done effectively, is people keep trying to come out on top, to betray one another, to look after their own individual interests more than the collective. It's making people more doing that. Perhaps that is a little bit why the other authorities have to be so unyielding. They're fighting against that so much because people are pushing back and wanting to do their own desires. There's likely strife on the Tyson about what to do with this wooden heart. Who should have it? Who should be the one researching it? On Anubis, I think there are definitely people that are still arguing that the wooden heart should not be so quickly abandoned, that it is their duty to more, that the failures that happened are just a sign that they did not worship it properly, and that they need to bring it back so that they can make proper amends to their god. Their god is angry with them for their failures, and abandoning the heart into orbit is just abandoning their god. All of this strife is happening throughout the sector where people are at each other's throats about things. They're splintering off. And the sector's name, we get Forgotten Channel. This is the Forgotten Channel. I think as soon as Emile enters this sector, there's just kind of hairs raising on the back of his neck. He couldn't quite put it to words, but something is wrong here. He can already feel that little bit of a corrupting influence from the beating wooden heart, even if it is now the dormant wooden heart. I think Fern does as well. Fern turns a color that is previously demonstrated in the rough language that they've worked out. Fern communicates unease, discomfort, which is odd because it had been so joyous up until this point, knowing that the journey was, like, Emile was getting Fern closer and closer to their own planet. This was supposed to be a good thing. But Fern is very uneasy, and we may well get our first full-on Star Wars ripoff of, I got a bad feeling about this. Everything just seems so solemn and off. There's this ship graveyard all around Anubis. This dead-looking world. Things are just wrong in general. But Emile is in control, knowing that the route that he has will only take him so far, that he still has to get to the other planet, which is in the map, but he doesn't have a good route to it. He wants to get a good opportunity to explore explore this shipyard before he goes to do his own salvage, where he will no doubt wind up running into the people of the Tyson. As for how they will react to each other when everybody is being pulled against each other with a sort of lingering strife, where this beating wooden heart of an old god wants to be found and utilized, what will happen with all of that? Well, that is very much a question for next time. Wait, don't go. There's still more. There's the prompts. There's the viewer participation part. This is when I ask you to take either an action and theme or a descriptor and focus or whatever I choose to roll that week and give me your best interpretation based on a prompt I give you. This week that prompt is going to be people have dug down into a planet. They've been going down towards its core and they uncover something. And I rolled a description and focus this week, and this time it turned up active and blockade. I want you to put together your best ideas for active and blockade and how that describes something that was found buried deep within a planet. And send your ideas over to me at starforgedpod@gmail.com. I eagerly anticipate them, but for now, play me out, music.